Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
Well, one of the things we've been talking about a lot here on Real Ag Radio is the fact there's been a slowdown in the machinery sector. On our October survey, Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, one of the things that farmers identified when it comes to cost cutting is equipment spending, and those numbers are proving true. Joining us to chat about the November numbers out of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers is one of their VPs. It is Kurt Blades. Kurt, how are we doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today, Sean.
Yeah. Okay. So, Kurt, let's start for our audience here. I guess bigger market. Let's start with the U.S. numbers and give us the run through in terms of where we are year to date compared to last year.
Well, I don't have anything really positive to share, as you had said in your kind of opening statements there. It's not good news for ag equipment sales. Also, not necessarily a surprise. We've seen this one coming at us for a while, but it really is showing itself with the November numbers. November is historically a pretty low month, but so when we looked at year to date, we're down about 14% across the board on tractors for the whole year of 2024. And we're down about 25%, 24% in combines year to date. So those are, there's no way to sugarcoat those. Those are pretty disappointing numbers. But also, it's kind of what our manufacturers and farmers have been telling us for the last 6 to 8 months, that this is coming. And as you correctly said, when the belts get tightened, you kind of have to buy seed, you kind of have to buy crop protection. Oftentimes, a tractor can last one more year, and I think that's the situation that we're in right now. Couple that with interest rates being particularly high, I think that's really showing up in some of those more considered expensive purchases as well.
What about the Canadian numbers? Do they reflect better? Are they a little more positive, or the same sort of story?
It's about the same. I mean, there's Canada's actually down about 18% year to date. There is a bright spot in Canada with articulated four-wheel drive showing some signs of life. It's actually up about 11% for the year. That's not a lot of numbers, but they are big pieces of equipment. So that does, point to some degree of positivity. Combines are a little stronger. They're only down 12% in Canada versus being down 24% in the United States. Those combine numbers are also sort of interesting because last year was a particularly strong year for combine sales. So you're comparing a strong year versus kind of a rebound year. So you kind of have to look at this a little more than just as a snapshot.
And if we look at some of your members, they're publicly traded, so we've been hearing some of the earnings statements. So not a surprise, some of those earnings statements have spoke to some of these broader industry numbers. Yeah. I guess what is kind of the outlook? What do we see going forward? Is this more of a short-term blip, or is this something that it typically takes a couple of years to work through? What happens from here forward?
Well, when we started to see this downturn about at the beginning of the summer, everyone was saying this is going to be with us for a little while. The definitions of a little while ranged from 6 months to 18 months. So let's say we're 6 months into this sort of early downturn, or 6 to 8 months into that early downturn. I think most folks are saying we're going to be dealing with this probably for the first couple of quarters of 2025 before we really start to see those strong turnarounds. But then again, it's agriculture. There's a lot of organic things that sort of come at us, whether it's the weather or global trade or interest rates or a new administration in the United States or whatever. Those things can turn pretty quickly, and that's also a good thing. But what we're paying keenly attention to, and this is what sort of causes that tail to last a little bit longer, is you look at dealer lots, and they're starting to see some equipment on dealer lots, specifically the combines and dealer lots, and that's something to just you kind of get an indication of what that means for the health of rural America, the health of the dealership. If you start to see those harvesters and pieces of equipment stack up on dealer lots, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I think the dealers are doing a pretty decent job of managing those, but that we've got to work through that inventory before we really start to see some of that major turnaround that we're looking for.
As a hobbyist economist, we know supply and demand. When
Mm-hmm.
demand slows and supply increases, we know that there's an impact on pricing.
Exactly.
Is that something that members are talking a lot about, or what's your
Well,
outlook?
that's what that's what's pretty great because I think we've all learned some lessons. Certainly in the manufacturing space, we learned some lessons uh, 10 years ago when we were coming off of just a boom, boom, boom years of equipment sales, and we just kept producing a lot of it. And then well, so we found ourselves in a demand situation where it sort of dried up. We had just an excess of inventory. In this case, as you had mentioned, those publicly traded companies have been uh, pretty straightforward about their trying to slow down or temper that supply to meet the demand or the anticipated slowdown in demand. And although those were really uncomfortable and unpopular decisions that were being made, for the last 12 months, it proved to be pretty insightful because the last thing you want is more equipment out there than the market can handle because that depresses prices, that depresses resale value, which ultimately that depresses farmers' bottom lines and their ability to get financing. So it's a delicate balance we got to work together. So I'm thrilled that the manufacturers had the foresight to begin to slow down. That has a very unfortunate ripple effect both in terms of individuals' jobs, which we heart goes out to, but also that whole supply chain. You hear about the big headlines of the publicly traded companies, but it's those component manufacturers are also struggling as a result of those slowdowns at the OEM level.
Yeah, and whether it's major manufacturers or it's those component suppliers going forward, there's a lot of talk about the implications of the policy around tariffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is
Absolutely.
some of those components are coming from around the world. Some are
Yep.
being produced right in America, but some of
Yep.
those are being produced in Mexico or abroad, Canada for
Yep.
that matter. What's AEM's positioning on that relative to some of the stuff we talked about?
Well, we've been pretty clear. Even the first Trump administration, we came up pretty strongly opposed to tariffs. Those were really kind of related to steel, and obviously, it takes a whole lot of steel to build equipment, so we pay a lot of attention to that one. But as you talk about the components, especially that Mexico, Canada, U.S. relationship is so important, and we're kind of symbiotic in how we use the components in component manufacturing in Canada to the U.S. and Mexico to U.S. and U.S. to Canada and Mexico, vice versa. All these things are very important. So we're paying a lot of attention to that particular relationship. Not to mention that there are just pieces of equipment that are frankly made in other countries. Wire harnesses is an example. That expertise is pretty specialized, and there's certain regions of the world that are really good at that, and we don't have that expertise here in the States, so we kind of have to go somewhere else. Well, you add a large tariff to that, and at some point we might be able to ramp up that production here in the States or in North America, but it doesn't happen overnight. Sort of like steel, it's still a global market. So if there's a tariff on steel that's produced in China, and we'd love nothing more than to buy stuff from only from those that are our neighbors. But the reality is it's a global market. So a tariff affects the global price across the board.
It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We see a slowdown in farm income, and so we're seeing a slowdown in sales. If tariffs are going to increase the cost of that equipment in a weak demand market, it actually slows the demand even more, right?
Man, Sean, I was trying to be positive and you took me down an even more negative
Well,
route here.
it's just that's one of I think the pieces to be kind of worked out here, and you can
Hmm.
see why manufacturers are pushing back. I think it kind of makes
Yeah.
sense. No farmer wants to. Hey, I want to pay 25% more for equipment. I don't
No.
think any farmer is saying that.
Yeah. Well, you
No
add
matter how much they love the brands.
exactly. And then you add to that, the agriculture gets a double hit because the amount of products that are sold overseas. So if you think of, soybeans and soybeans to China or corn to Mexico, it's like any of those tariffs have a pretty big impact on the demand, not to mention what goes on with the biofuels market. So it is, the tariffs are particularly concerning for those of us in the ag industry.
Now, to end on a positive note, though, if farm profitability at the farm gate, if profitability improves in 2025 and into 26, that's going to reverse this trend because
Absolutely.
they're very tied together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'll tell you, that's the good thing, Sean. We're blessed to work in an industry that matters. That's part of global security. It's part of food security. All these things are important. So yeah, we have bumps in the road that happen in agriculture every few years. We know that, but long-term outlook couldn't be more positive. When you add technology, when you add, the fact that the population continues to grow. Agriculture is a pretty good spot to be in. Yeah, this too will pass, and that's what makes the industry that we operate in to be so pleasant because we're tightening our belt right now, and we're probably going to tighten our belt for a little bit longer. But the glory days are still out there.
Hey, Kurt, thanks a lot for joining us here. I know you squeezed us in. I really do appreciate providing some insight on the latest AAM numbers.
You bet. Thanks so much, Sean.